So I want to start this story of the British Raj after 1858, how they managed to keep power carefully by asking you to kind of walk and chew bubblegum at the same time, keep two thoughts going. It's real easy to just fall into thinking that it's purely a story of British exploitation, which is true, or it's purely a story of British building up things and modernizing India. There's elements to both of those outlooks and perspectives that are true, but of course, like so much of history, it's a blend. And it kind of ends up tilting one way, and I'll let you kind of take what you will from this. I want to start by saying it's true, the British do invest in India. There are legitimate economic, commercial projects that happen, and let's go through some of those so we get that clear in our head. They carry out what are called infrastructure projects, big public and private entities that facilitate India's economy. Here are some examples. Number one, transportation. Getting around from one part of India to the other, this really takes off, particularly in the years after 1850, where railways, being the new technology of the Industrial Revolution, certainly the first wave of the Industrial Revolution, really take off in India. And Britain stitches together the entire subcontinent in a network of railways that moves agricultural and commercial products throughout. They build railways. They invest hundreds of thousands of pounds, British pounds as in a note of currency, in building this. Millions of pounds. Communication, especially after 1850 when the telegraph is popularized throughout the world. Telegraphs were, an early communication device that you communicated through electronic code, Morse code. And then by the late 19th century, early 20th century, telephones are a mature technology, and you can communicate through India that way. Communication is really the main way you run an empire. If you lack communication, it's hard to run an empire, and this allows the British to kind of keep tabs on India. Education. It's true. The British do invest in schools, and particularly universities and technical schools that can transmit knowledge of the Industrial Revolution and, engineers and doctors and a variety of other technical trained people, electricians and so forth. Those really do get built, and there are British administrators and their kids who get educated there, and there are Indians and their kids that get educated at those schools. The British bring new medicines, just to give you some examples for those of you interested in medical history. This era of the late 19th century, the first couple decades of the Raj, was transformational in medicine. This is the era of antiseptics, the idea that you clean instruments before and after surgery and you don't transmit infections. Joseph Lister, a Scottish doctor, develops the first antiseptics through carbonic acid, figures out you can clean instruments, and all of a sudden people don't die of gangrenous infections. Later on, antibiotics and new vaccines come into being, new chemicals are used in various treatments. A lot of this modernity in medicine gets brought to India. One famous example is the British discover that quinine can counteract malaria, which is going to kill scores and scores of British administrators and their families when they're exposed to this tropical disease. Irrigation project. Much of India is going to be brought under land cultivation, as it always has been. But under the British Raj, cash crops are going to be prioritized. Tea, coffee, sugar, cotton. These are not going to be foods that can feed you and fill the bellies of hundreds of millions of Indians, but they're going to be market luxury products. And the British are going to figure out ways to get water, capture and direct water to those new cash crops. But here's the big takeaway, the big idea, one that might appear in a test question, the big essential point here. With all of this stuff built, you could choose to emphasize this and be accurate and point to the railways and the telegraph wires and the universities. But this infrastructure, it tends to, in its construction, facilitate British investments and to improve British investments. And yes, many Indians do reap rewards from that, especially if they work within those industries. But not the overall benefit of the society. These aren't being constructed with the intention of how can we improve the material well-being of every Indian. They're often being constructed with the point of view in mind, how can we boost the potential growth of a particular industry or the potential profit of a particular sector that might benefit a narrower group. So that's the angle that I wanted us to be sensitive to. This is an image of British railways constructed in India. This is, I think, 1853. So this is early on in the process, and they had this many railways stitching together the subcontinent. Here's where we're going to do something different. You're going to have a chance to talk with some people around you. We're going to do some advertisement analysis here. So imperial advertisement analysis. I'm going to show you 3 ads from the British Raj era. Your task is to consider this overall question. You're not going to specifically answer it, but how does each advertisement seem to portray the people and or the society of India? How are they seemingly portrayed? And you got to look carefully, closely, with an eye for detail here. Here's what I want you to do for each ad. 2 things, really quick. Who's the target audience appear to be? And what's the message in your own words in a couple words? Don't try to replicate what you see on the screen, but in your own words, what's the message seem to be? Record these in your notes. And here's the first one. I'm going to give you a minute to consider this. The Great Indian Peninsula Railway. And for those of you who can't read the bottom here, cafe car, reclining seats, electric lights, and fans. Vestibulum throughout with automatic couplers, train signal, and quick-acting brakes. Because you want quick-acting brakes. The rest I'll leave to you to analyze. Target audience. Who's it aimed at? Like what particular group of people seems to be aimed here? And what is their message? Obviously it's an ad for a railway. You can talk with a person or a couple people sitting around you if you'd like. We're going to share this out. Is this aimed at a particular class of people? Is it aimed at a specific gender? Going to need some volunteers here. I appreciate all of your analysis. This class has been really top-notch in this regard. What's that? Okay. So, who thinks they've got a target audience? Yeah. Okay, the upper class is being targeted here. What's the message in your own words? Since what do they appear to be trying to tell us? Few words as possible.
Quick, comfortable, nice.
Quick, comfortable, nice. Ride our railway. All right. Target audience and the message. Who's got another one? Saw a couple hands up here. Yeah. People outside of India? Why do you say that?
Because they're like explaining in this picture on how everything's super good and advanced and how they're showing that their leadership is great.
Okay. Yeah, come to India. You get these nice railways, the seats recline, the brakes work really well. Good stuff here. Yeah. Even the fans. Let's hear one more. Some of you, nobody's caught what you caught, Mr. Ellenbecker. Kind of a savant when it comes to advertisement analysis. Yeah.
I think as a facade, it's kind of supposed to be aimed at British citizens looking to ride the railway, but also if an Indian sees this, they'll see what the British is doing in that country and how it's making it look so much nicer.
Yeah. Wealthy British citizens who want to ride our railway and feel safe, check. Indian citizens who wants to be kind of proud about the glitzy stuff that Britain's building, check. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Oh, interesting. The idea. Well, yeah. And when you do travel, I mean, you do kind of want it quick, but they also talk about the comforts too. So I see what you're saying, Mr. Ellenbecker. Can you illuminate for us what caught your eye?
That top left image was the first thing I was drawn to. What do we see going on there? Anybody want to take a stab at it? Okay, so we have one Hindu temple. Is what it looks like to me, the one with the gold plated kind of tower on it. What's next to it? A church. So you can come to India and you can still worship. We have houses of God here. And hey, if you want to go next door and tour that pagan Hindu temple, you could do that too. So they have that idea of religiosity juxtaposed to their uncivilized view of the Indians.
And ride on the comfortable railroad. All right, so we're going to be a little bit quicker on the next one here. Brook Bond Tea. The particular brand is called, or the particular type here is Cora Dust. The center of attraction, Cora. Target demographic or the target audience, and the message. If anyone wants to Google if Brook Bond Tea is still around or Cora Dust Tea is still around, might try this out. Okay, who thinks they have it? Target audience. Who do you think this is aimed at? Annalise, go ahead. Shh. Aimed at Indians? Why so? Okay. Fair enough. And what's the message quickly that you took from this? It's good tea. You'll be happy and dancing. All right. Who's got an audience and message to share? Got to hear from one more. Audience? Yeah. New people right off the train? Why so? Okay. And what do you think the message is? What are they trying to tell you here? If we could figure out what this company wants you to do, what would it be? Buy our tea, yeah. It will make you happy. You'll be dancing. Mr. Ellenbecker, I'm thankfully somebody else can do some more with this here.
I just look. I don't think Cora Dust is still.
That's not? All right.
Yeah.
Must have
It
went.
was the first package, like little package teas coming out of India.
Whoa. All right. Yeah.
Instead of the long.
Last one here. More Brook Bond tea comes to you with garden freshness. Different people. Look at the people carefully. Audience and message. Think creatively. Who's got an audience and message? I need to see some more hands up here. This is not a lot of heavy lifting here. Yeah, back there. Okay. Okay. Aiming, as you say, probably well off British women here who notice the styles and fashion change. This is probably from the late 19-teens, early 1920s, and emphasizing the freshness. And you noted the Indian man serving the tea. Are there other messages you can gather from this tea? Yeah. I'm sorry, the first part of that. Okay, it could be marketed at Indians, perhaps, like the fact that they're serving the tea, they have some sort of role here. Yeah.
I think they you know how they said it comes to your garden freshness. Well, I think they're using the ladies in the photos to like portray like a sweetness, you know, like what is it, like soft.
Yeah.
No disrespect towards any women. Y'all can be just as strong as men nowadays. I'm just saying that.
But at the time period, this would have been the message.
Exactly.
So sort of the feminine softness, the tea. Okay. I guess that could be an angle here. The power relationship here. Is there a power relationship on display? Can anybody clarify this? Yeah. Okay, so the superiority of the British women and the Indian man who's serving, which is kind of an act of submission going on there, is maybe conveying a certain message about the whole imperial project of the Raj in general. All right, let's shift it back to notes. Thank you for those contributions here. British exploitation. Here's the other part that I need you to keep in mind as we think about the Raj. And I said we're going to have to walk and chew bubblegum and see a couple of things that are happening simultaneously. It is very much a story of exploitation. You can't get around this. The British are in India to reap benefits. Their companies reap benefits. Their administrators reap benefits. The people that go there to work on the engineering projects reap benefits. One way, and we'll look at several, that the British reap benefits and exploit India is through human labor. And this is probably the most obvious one. It's the one the British need to do the most because they don't have a lot of human labor available in country, they themselves, because there's only 100,000 of them and over 300 million Indians. India provides recruits for the British Army to run their empire. Remember that empire that the sun never set on. You're only able to do that if you can get manpower, human power, efficiently from one part of the empire to the other. And India is a land of 300 million. So simply to control the country, the very act of patrolling, carrying out law and order in the country relies on Indian sepoys to shoulder rifles, to run drills, to follow the orders of officers, to put down internal disputes. If there's a riot, it's going to be Indian sepoys who get called in under British orders. Human labor also exists in a different form, which is the people who actually grow the food, or not just food. In fact, food's going to be only part of the story. A lot of it's going to be cash crops. Cotton, coffee, tea, Brook and Bond tea. It's not going to be British subjects, or well, it was going to be British subjects, they're just going to be Indian British subjects. It's not going to be people from Great Britain, the British Isles, that are going to be going out and farming the tea leaves for Brook and Bond tea. It's going to be largely Indian laborers. Taxation. When you're running an empire, you need taxation to fund, the military instruments, the navy, the hardware of running a military, not to mention the infrastructure projects. Britain is able to capture tax revenue in a variety of forms. Because they produce things in India, they can tax those items, but particularly when they sell things back to native Indians, they have them pay a tax in addition to various taxes that get exerted on the landowners and their peasant laborers and farmers. These taxes fund building projects like irrigation, like railroads, like the maintenance of the military, like paying Indian sepoys. They get a check to show up and do their drills and to shoulder a British Enfield rifle and follow orders. That all costs money. Market for products. Cannot emphasize this point enough. Because India is such a vast place with many people and many potential customers, it is a gold mine. It is the mothership of markets for the British Empire. Next to China. When China comes online, that's going to be another one. Because there are so many people, British companies and investors look at India as a place to sell refined goods. You can grow the tea, grow the coffee, grow the cotton in India, send it back to Britain or some other part of the empire, refine it into a different good, and then sell that good back to the same people. That is a very lucrative, money-making enterprise. It benefits British companies, it benefits British investors. It's also true that some Indians who are part and parcel to that process, that they're going to benefit as well. All of this exploitation, while there's some overall benefit to India, and there's certainly a lot of benefit going to British companies, runs into a tragic but inescapable problem. And that is the famine problem. Because Britain arranges its colony, its imperial project in such a way to emphasize cash crops, things you can't eat, things that don't fill the bellies of peasants who work for a zamindar on a farm in Punjab province. Because they structure it that way, on cash crops, they don't have as much food on hand in India. Britain has food, it gets it from other parts of the empire. And India does have food, but when there's a famine, when there's a bad streak of weather, which famines, by the way, happen throughout time and place in all places. Europe has them, Africa, the Americas, of course. But if you arrange the whole society to focus on things that can't be eaten, for the most part, you're going to be unprepared. And British relief organizations are going to, it's true, work really hard to stop and reduce some of the famine in India. But they're going to be more acute and more frequent in the years of the Raj because of the British system, which doesn't emphasize food production as much as it does cash crops. Does that make sense? Let me show you an image here, a graph. Famines had always existed in India. If you look at the right side, I mean, this is the British era where the British are going to be in India in a big way. Anything after the late 1850s is going to be the period of the Raj. Famines are right here. Number of famines. This is number of death in millions. The first couple decades of the British Raj, the last quarter century of the 1800s. Going to be some bad weather there, but that's also the period where all of these cash crops are coming online. 18 famines, it's estimated, and you can't census this out exactly, but it's estimated somewhere around 26 million people are going to die of famine in this. This is one of the numerical values of empire that you should keep in your mind as you think about this, is that it comes at a tremendous cost. You can't maybe attribute this all to the British. Obviously, famines are going to happen. There are going to be millions of people who die in other famines. Also, later on, even into the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, right in the middle of World War II, one of the things when you think globally about empire, during the midst of the chaos and trauma of World War II, there's a huge famine in India called the Bengal famine. You can Google it. Over 1 million people are going to die of starvation in India right in the middle of that. When you think about all those battles of World War II, Stalingrad, D-Day, Battle of Britain, Bengal famine's happening. Next slide. To kind of stitch it all together for you. How does the economy of British India work? How does it look? As I just said, it's structured around cash crops for British investors and global markets. Everything from Brook Bond tea to Cadbury chocolate to various British banks and investment stock brokerage houses, other types of agricultural trade. What this does is it locks most Indians into agricultural work. Tea leaf farming, cotton farming, coffee, sugar. There's always work to be had there. Limited food crops. I told you that story before. The emphasis isn't on wheat and rice as much as it is on these other items. Britain limits India's ability to export goods through its currency because all international trade through British India has to be converted into British pounds, and then there's also all sorts of regulations that if you're an Indian pottery maker or fine jewelry maker or something else, and you want to sell it to a market in, say, China or Africa or the Americas or Europe, wherever it may be, you often have to convert your currencies into British pounds or to various banknotes, and oftentimes there are fees and taxes associated with that. And many of the products that you need just to survive, whether it's food or other products, you have to buy and pay a tax. That goes back to the British government as well. So it's very difficult for Indian producers to break out of that British imperial system and to find markets elsewhere. Everything is kind of structured around British investors and British companies and so on. I do want to emphasize there are Indians who do benefit from this system, particularly the Indian middle class, or if you come from a privileged family in India, you can get educated at British universities and you can get opportunities within the empire, whether you're trained in some sort of profession like a doctor, a lawyer, or a merchant, or if you're from a zamindar family who naturally has privilege and you would have had it going back for centuries under the Mughals. Some of these people can climb the social ladder and they can break out of the caste system and they can go abroad or become administrators themselves. Overall, there's lower economic growth during the British Raj than before. Certain parts of the Raj will benefit tremendously. If you're a corporation invested in tea or coffee or cotton, you're probably reaping a lot of benefits. But overall, India has slower growth during this time. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to look at two pieces of text, but I want to prime you first by telling you a little something about these texts. They're from textbooks describing the British Raj. We're going to look at two perspectives. The first perspective is from the British point of view. It's a textbook called The English in India, 1932, so during the Raj, by a guy named J.A.R. Marriott. I'll read it. You develop a summary sentence and be prepared to share. British brains, British enterprise, and British capital have changed the face of India. Means of communication have been developed. There are great numbers of bridges, more than 40,000 miles of railway, and 70,000 miles of paved roads. These testify to the skill and industry of British engineers. Irrigation works on very large scales have brought 30 million acres under cultivation or farming. This has greatly added to the agricultural wealth of the country. Industrialization has also begun. India now has improved sanitation and higher standard of living. It has a fine transportation system and carefully thought out schemes for relief work, which is like what you give during time of famine. Because of these things, famines have now almost disappeared. What is Marriott trying to say in a sentence? Take a moment, write it down. This is perspective one. You can be brief. Don't try to copy everything he says. Don't try to add every detail. You're summarizing. Who thinks they have one? What's Marriott trying to say? In a sentence. Yeah, back there. British rule overall has been a massive benefit to the Indian people. I think Marriott would probably agree with that. Yeah.
British have helped India economically and socially extremely, causing them to be indebted to their surpassing knowledge and power.
Okay, I like how you add a little rhetorical flourish there. The idea that Indians should be indebted to the British for the things that they've added. Yeah, I think that's a perspective that a lot of British imperial administrators and thinkers at the time would have clung to and hung their hats on. There is another perspective, however. This is from Jawaharlal Nehru. Nehru goes on to be the first president of India. He'll be a character in the movie Gandhi. He writes a book in 1946 called The Discovery of India, which kind of is a de facto history textbook in many ways from an Indian perspective. Here's what Nehru says. Other old Indian industries, shipbuilding, metalwork, glass, paper, and many crafts were broken up. The Thus, the economic development of India was stopped and the growth of new industry was prevented. A typical colonial economy was built up. India became an agricultural colony of industrial England. It supplied raw materials and provided markets for England's industrial goods. The destruction of industry led to unemployment on a vast scale. The poverty of the country grew. The standard of living fell to terribly low levels. Take a moment, generate a summary sentence. What's Nehru trying to say? I got you. Who thinks they've got a summary of what Nehru wants to communicate? Yeah. The British pretty much handicapped India and caused them to start over from scratch. Yeah, I think Nehru would probably agree with that. Let's hear one more. Yeah. Anyways. British were favored, poverty grew, people were suffering. Yeah, it's a key component to the story. All right. I'd like for you to watch this next excerpt